So let's look at the list. The very first thing is leveraging the new cost dynamic with business units. And what does that really mean? I've been around this profession for 30 years, and in my 30 years, this is the first time that I've seen business units coming to procurement and saying, help us out with cost reductions because we're under tremendous pressures. And the reason is because of the pandemic. The pandemic changed everything. In the past, business units would engage us late because they could. Now they can't anymore. And if you are not recognizing this opportunity, go dig because it's there. We're seeing it with our clients across all industries and across all geographies. New cost pressures being put on business units are opening a window or a door, if you like, for procurement to walk through. And for the first time since I've been in the profession, business units are embracing procurement engagement and help and early involvement to try and make a difference. So get with your business units and have this discussion. My bet is you won't see this happen again during your career, not as broadly as it is right now. So that's the first thing we have to be doing. The second thing is we need to establish new ways to deliver or to convey really procurement value. And what this means is, currently we report up cost savings metrics to the executive staff, and those metrics don't mean anything to them. They may say, great job, thank you very much, but I'm telling you, they don't mean anything to them. And the reason they don't is the money doesn't exist. If you tell your CEO and your CFO, we saved you $26.8 million this year, and they say, that's great, we could use that money, where is it? Your answer is going to be, well, you see, we gave that money back to the business units and, well, they spent it, it's gone. And so we have to, that's part of why we're in the back office, by the way, is because procurement is perceived by executive staff as delivering monopoly savings, savings that aren't real, paper savings, PowerPoint savings to the company. And so as a procurement executive, you should think about things differently. One of the things you could look at is reporting ROI, return on investment on the procurement department, taking all of the savings and taking that relative to the departmental expenditures in total for labor and all the costs that are in your budget, and then deriving a return on investment so that they see that the money they spend on procurement is money well spent. The next thing you could do is you could start, instead of reporting savings, to report contributions to EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. That would be another way to kind of look at it. There's other strategies in the future I want our profession to move towards. It's going to take time, but that involves savings actually going to the CFO and not back to the business unit. I don't think we're ready for that in 2024 because it comes fraught with problems. But in the meantime, these are some things you can do that will absolutely make a difference. The next thing is, we're spending so much time getting our people to be supplier and commodity experts, which is great time spent. And I'm glad you're doing that. But what we really need to do in addition to that is we need to get our people to be business unit experts. It's not enough to sit in their staff meetings. Business units need to feel like procurement acts in their best interest. That's the only way they're going to engage you early on an ongoing basis. The reason they don't engage you early now, in general, over time, has been because they don't see the value of doing it. So in order to deliver that value, you need to become expert in their business and be talking their language, just like we do with suppliers. So reading all of their status reports, understanding what their performance metrics are, understanding what their goals are for the year, what keeps them awake at night, where they're performing well and where they're not. And then every time we engage the business units, it's doing so with the focus on their objectives and their agenda. And that's going to get them to see procurement is not here to just push their initiatives. They're here to help us push our initiatives. So being business unit experts is something you need to drive with all of your organization for better results. The next thing is to be better internal marketers. And I dare say that we're possibly the worst internal marketers inside the company. We don't do a very good job of establishing for the broad base of employees what is the value that procurement is delivering. You know who does it really well is marketing. Marketing puts, human resources. Human resources puts these tabletop, kind of those cardboard tents all over tables in the cafeteria that talks about the wonderful things human resources doing. They run open forums, they send out surveys, they have newsletters, they have posters plastered all over the place talking about their wonderful contributions. When was the last time you saw procurement doing any of those things? You need to talk about how procurement is enabling enterprise advantage and is allowing the company to invest in things like new gymnasiums and new buildings and better facilities and all these things, and perhaps better health care. There's things you can characterize that, hey, we're helping make these things happen. Without it, these contributions wouldn't happen. These capabilities wouldn't happen. Having lots of testimonials from different internal customers who are saying the great things that have been done, perhaps having open forums, giving opportunities for the general employee base to give input. All of this stuff is important if you want to move us from the back office to the front office and to have a change of perception about procurement. And today, we're viewed as a back office service provider like payroll. And in order to get us out of there, one of the things you have to do is internal marketing. So that has to be a major focus. The next thing is for us to become much better influencers. And probably your gut reaction is, what do you mean? We're already the best influencers there are. We're negotiating millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts, maybe. My answer is that's not influencing, that's negotiating. And if you want to know what the difference between influence and negotiating is, I thought about this for decades until I finally came to a very rock solid conclusion on the difference. The difference between influence and negotiating is negotiating is driving change with money involved, and influence is driving change without money involved. And so procurement is really good at negotiating. The business unit gives us millions of dollars and we go off and we negotiate for results with that. However, why is it that we achieve great results on the outside, but we can't achieve those same negotiation results internally? It's because those aren't negotiations. Those are cases where influence is required. And we have zero training in how to achieve negotiation results, let's say, absent money involved. We only know how to negotiate with money. We've never been trained on how to negotiate without money. Guess who knows how to negotiate without money? The whole rest of the company. You think when manufacturing wants to influence another business unit, they can dangle millions of dollars? You think when payroll wants to negotiate with another internal business unit, they can dangle millions of dollars? Nobody can. They all have to exercise influence, which means driving change based on merit and not based on being able to dangle money. Another way to characterize the difference between motivation, between influence and negotiation is, negotiation is, at least with suppliers, you're getting things done because they have to. They're agreeing with you because they have to. They can't walk away from the money. Influence is people agree with your agenda because they want to. And that's a gigantic difference. So, you may not know that almost all external negotiation failures are because of internal negotiation failure, rather because of internal influence failure. So build your organization's capability to be better influencers. And that starts with being more empathetic with the business units, not being so reliant on procurement policy, because they view us as having allegiance to policy instead of having allegiance to their success, the business units. If you want to influence better, you need to demonstrate allegiance to business unit success. It's the reason why your company exists. is not to procure things. It's for the business units to do what they do. That's why your company exists. So don't lose sight of that. Engaging with the business units differently, putting their agenda as the primary topic and focus will establish intrinsic motivation on their part to want to engage earlier, to collaborate with procurement, and to align with your policies, because they now know that you're going to use those tools to enable their business objectives rather than yours. That's what influence is all about. And so we need to be an organization of much better influencers. As procurement executives, you need to help drive that. The next thing has to do with supplier innovation. And we suffer from something in corporations. And we see this with our clients all over the world, across all industries, is that the business units feel like in order to get credit for something, they have to invent the idea. And that's really a deadly practice, because often bad ideas are invented, or ideas are invented in an ill-conceived fashion, meaning the scope of work, the specification is created in a way that perhaps delivers value but delivers lots of cost, or delivers value but brings lots of quality problems, or all sorts of things go wrong. And when you define the scope of work or spec and give it to the supplier, then the supplier is going to make you sign indemnification language that indemnifies them for the results, because it's not their idea. They're going to say, listen, if you were going to use our idea, then we wouldn't want to be indemnified because we believe in our idea. It's proven. But you want us to implement your idea. This is your spec. This is your scope of work. We don't know if your idea is going to work. We'll do exactly what you're asking us to do, but we're not going to contractually promise that it's going to work. We're not crazy. And so who's the experts? Is it the business unit? Is it procurement? Or is it the supplier? The answer now and always is the supplier. And if you don't embrace that, and if your people don't embrace that, you will forever be mired in mediocrity. I don't know how to be more clear than that. The supplier does what they're doing all day long for years and years. Your business unit, it's just one of many different types of things they're procuring. It's far better to tell the business unit not what you want to buy, but what you want to accomplish. And then you can tell them what it is you want to buy and ask for their input. And then they can tell you, and then solicit their innovation. Well, they say, well, everybody, all of our clients who've done it this way have run into problems. The way you really ought to do it is this way, or you ought to use this material instead of that material, or so forth. And when you do it that way, you can shift the burden of contractual risk to the supplier. And if they fail to perform, it'll be their fault. But if it's your idea, if it fails to perform, it'll be your fault, and you'll still owe the supplier all the money. So leverage supplier innovation. The biggest breakthroughs I've seen consistently in cost, quality, performance, results is almost always related to harnessing supplier innovation in a very smart way. The next thing we need to do is you need to tell all of your people, stop accepting scope of work and specs from the business units as being sacred. They're not sacred. In fact, they're oftentimes ill-conceived, at least from a cost perspective. So the fact that a scope of work or spec may work just fine for what the business unit is trying to accomplish doesn't mean it's cost effective. In fact, our institute has found, in working with clients around the world across different industries, on average, when we take major contracts where there's a lot of expenditures happening and where the end user or the business unit developed a scope of work or spec, and we go in there and dive into it and collaborate with the supplier or suppliers to identify, are there costs there that are mischaracterized or that should be characterized differently? On average, we find 18% savings, 18% costs that we're able to surgically remove forever from the product or service design and from the supply chain. And then, following which, you still get to go into negotiations with the supplier to reduce price further. It's just a gold mine. And how many people are talking about it? Almost nobody. We use strategies related to standardization, simplification, which is huge, reuse, and also leveraging some of the supplier innovation strategies and supplier ideas to streamline the cost, to have the minimum components, the maximum of standardization, standardized components, and the most simplified model possible while still achieving or exceeding the performance outcomes that the business unit has stated they wanted to achieve. It's like magic when you start doing these things. And so never accept the scope of work or spec as sacred. The majority of the savings, in fact, are not in supplier negotiations. The majority of the savings opportunities are in the architecture of the demand itself. Don't ever forget that. Companies today, not only they're just not recognizing this, they're not pursuing it. They're just taking the scope of work and spec and running as fast as they can and implementing it wholesale with the supplier. And it's just a shame. Industries are losing billions of dollars probably because of this. Then the next thing is driving a corporate capability with away from the table negotiation strategies. And the reason I say this is the entire procurement and negotiation profession, every single procurement negotiations, or let's just say every single negotiations course that's out there for sales or procurement, every single one. And for that matter, almost all consulting engagements, certification programs, almost everything we see out there that's negotiation oriented is exclusively focused on at the table negotiation strategies, which is a sin. It's a sin because that's a parasitic move. You're parasitically trying to gain at the supplier's expense, and the only way in which you can gain savings is for the supplier to make less money. And that's been happening since the invention of currency. And we're better than that. We'll keep doing that, and we'll keep getting better at doing it. But there is so much more value to be derived in away from the table strategies. Away from the table strategies include bargaining power moves to either increase your bargaining power or decrease the supplier's bargaining power, and therefore allowing you to have more aggressive and assertive positions that you deserve. The other thing is to drive investigative negotiations and value creation. And these are things where you investigate what is it that keeps the supplier awake at night, and then invent value propositions to present to them to solve those problems, for which they'll gladly give large returns. As an example, one of our clients just engaged in investigative negotiations. They are a potato chip manufacturer, and they found out their potato suppliers are struggling with cold storage of potatoes because they harvest once a year, but they have to store potatoes all year. They proposed to shift cold storage to their facilities, which had room. And by doing that, by investigating and then creating this value proposition, the suppliers readily agreed to an additional 20% discount for this idea, which would have never been on the table otherwise. So it's another example of a sort of away from the table move. The final away from the table move is the kind we already talked about, which is we call it driving upstream design for TCO, analyzing the demand, the architecture of the demand for simplification, standardization, reuse, and supplier innovation. These are all really critical so that we don't just have an organization of at-the-table negotiators. We can do better than this. Then the next thing is to address the cancer in our profession. And the cancer is we have an entire organization that is focusing on the acquisition of goods and services. And you might say, well, of course they are. What's wrong with that? And my answer is everything's wrong with that. What our institute has found over many, many years, and I've never found anything to prove this wrong, is that the number one cancer that's eating our profession alive is that we're buying goods and services instead of performance results. We have end users architecting demand for goods and services in the form of specs and scope of work. Then procurement solicits for goods and services. They negotiate for goods and services. They contract for goods and services. And then guess what? We receive goods and services. So what's the problem? The problem is end users complain not because of goods and services, but because of performance results. And this process has been repeating for decades and probably longer. So the entire procurement process needs to be completely re-architected so that it starts from the beginning with a singular focus on performance results. We architect demand for performance results. Then we solicit for performance results, which can include specs and scope of work. That's okay. Then we negotiate for performance results and contract for them, and then we receive performance results. When you don't do this, which is the default in every company I've run into, then you will have, instead of an organization of procurement professionals, you will have an organization of firefighters. And that is the kiss of death. And so what we want is an organization of procurement professionals who have time on their schedule because they're not firefighting to engage in strategic activities. So re-architect and transform your entire organization's procurement processes to focus on performance outcomes. This is my organization's bread and butter on where we work with clients the most. And then I would say, as a final note, procurement spends so much time, our clients that struggle, I should say, achieving results are the ones in which we give them counsel and we work with them on something and they say, okay, we need to take it to the steering committee. We need to go get it approved. We need to go take it to this person. We need to go get this person's buy-in. Those are our clients that struggle. Do you know which clients do the best? The ones that don't wait for someone else to crown them. The ones that are willing to crown themselves. The ones who say, we're going to do this and we don't need approval from anybody. And if we fail, which we make sure they don't, but if we fail, so be it. So be it. But we are going to embark on these strategies, such as the 9 above. If you take the advice from the 9 items above and you want to take it to a steering committee, good luck. You're going to end up having to do 100 PowerPoint presentations and lose endless hours out of your professional and personal life. And in the end, you'll just end up with a bunch of action items and partial agreement and people who don't agree and so forth. Never wait for somebody else to crown you. You can crown yourself. That is the way to success in this profession. And so with that, I want you to really think about these two fish bowls here. There's overhead service providers and there's revenue and profit generators. And procurement, rightly or wrongly, is viewed as a back office service provider that generates cost. And that's a bad fishbowl to be in because those organizations are funded poorly, resourced poorly, looked down upon, and instead of having a seat at the table with the executive staff, they're always on the menu for lunch. And so we need to get out of this fishbowl and jump into the other one where we are and are perceived as value-added center of profit. And so this is the place that we want to get to be, ladies and gentlemen. And as procurement executives, I'm challenging all of you in 2024 to engage in strategies to do this. And we're always happy as well if you reach out for our assistance. Have a fantastic and game-changing 2024 for the field of procurement and for your procurement organization.